When I started this adventure of playing through the mainline Resident Evil games, I wasn't sure if I should start with the original Resident Evil from 1995 or its 2002 remake. After hearing that the remake was one of the best remakes of all time, I decided to start with it and then go back to the original after I was done. In my critique of the first game, I said if you were to ask me to choose between the two, I would easily pick the remake. Updated controls, added locations, and the environmental and character redesigns has me agreeing that this really is one of the best remakes ever made. The only reason I would go back to the original was if I wanted to feel retro, or to listen to some hilariously bad voice acting.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
After beating both versions of the original Resident Evil, I moved on to the sequel. But again, I found myself in the same dilemma. Should I play the original Resident Evil 2 from 1998, or the 2019 remake? Of course I was going to play both, but which do I start with? That's when I looked for the answer online, and a consistent talking point I kept hearing from several reviews is that the modernization of the remake practically made it a different game. It didn't actually matter which one I started with because, unlike with the first game, the Resident Evil 2 remake can't replace the original. When people think of a video game remake, they think updated visuals, better controls, maybe some new areas, and maybe some new mechanics. However, with Resident Evil 2, the gameplay, story, and characters have been so drastically revamped and modernized from the ground up that it'd be like comparing apples to oranges. With that said, there's no need for me to compare them in this video. I'll just say this: play both. The original RE2 has a lot to appreciate, and there's no denying that it has some incredible charm after 22 years.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
Hold your fire! I'm a human!
Now with that little caveat out of the way, let's re-enter survival horror with the 2019 Resident Evil 2. When you first boot up the game, you're given the choice to either play as rookie cop Leon Kennedy or biker girl Claire Redfield. Both start and end the game the same, but how they get there is why you're encouraged to play both. You're free to choose who you want to play as first, but I'd personally recommend going from Leon to Claire. Leon has the better story, while Claire has more interesting gameplay. So if you don't want to play as the other player, at least you're getting the best story with Leon, in my opinion. After you pick your character, you choose a difficulty. You have Assist, which is for bubble-blowing babies, Normal, which is, well, it's normal, it's what everyone picks, and Hardcore, which really isn't hard if you've played a Resident Evil game before. I, filling up to the task, picked Hardcore, and also it's the only difficulty option that has the ink ribbon save mechanic from the last game. How this mechanic would work is that if you want to save your progress, you'll have to find an ink ribbon that can only be used on a typewriter. So if you wanted to save your progress, you'll have to get to one by not being killed by zombies. And if you did die, well, you would go back to the last time you saved. I thought that this mechanic was wonderfully utilized in the first game. There's a lot of anxiety that comes with being low on health and ammo and having to find an ink ribbon to save the last hour worth of progress. Taking that feeling away for people who chose normal, I think was a mistake. The game opens on a truck driver driving in the rain and eating a burger that I can't tell if it looks appetizing or repulsive. While listening to a radio broadcast where a guy describes a bad encounter he had with what the player already knows as a half-turned woman, trying to adjust the radio, the truck driver accidentally rams into a pedestrian. Checking to see if they're possibly still alive, he turns around in distraught, asking what he'll do now. Then we see the person that he hit slowly rise up behind him as the screen goes black, with the use of a pretty cliche music sting. This opening indicates only the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. Next, depending on who you pick, we're introduced to our playable characters. For the sake of convenience, I'll continue with Leon's perspective. Leon drives his Jeep into a gas station. After hearing glass shatter and discovering blood, Leon goes to investigate. This is when the player takes control. Over-the-shoulder camera perspective isn't anything new for Resident Evil veterans, as it's a perspective that was first introduced in Resident Evil 4 back in 2005. But since I'm not playing in order of release, this perspective was a dramatic change of pace for me. Using this camera angle is understandable in modernizing this remake. This choice, however, is one of many differences from the original that changes the game drastically. I've already gone in depth about this in my last critique, explaining the benefits of fixed camera angles, so I'll just say, though I prefer over the shoulder, the loss of the fixed perspective is something to be missed. Knowing that I was likely going to encounter my first zombie, I walked around the front of the gas station to check if there was anything I could pick up. There wasn't, but while I was walking around, I really started to appreciate how good this game looks. Leon and Claire's character models are some of the most detailed I've seen come out of gaming this generation. I would personally give Capcom a reward for their impressive display of realistic facial expressive technology. Too bad I can't say the same about the elemental artifacts in this game. Going inside the station, Leon says,
Something's not right.
Yeah, no shit. I love the little nod to the health items you'll get later. Herb ice cream, cute, but I bet it tastes terrible. You'll find a guy in the back in critical condition who doesn't say anything, he just points to the player where to go. When entering the storage, the guy locks you in. What an asshole. This is where you encounter your first zombie. Leon pulls out his gun, which caught me off guard at first because I didn't even know he was carrying one. I know you're a rookie cop, Leon, but maybe you should have pulled that out when you enter this place. The first thing I noticed when aiming is how the reticle will move in after a few seconds to help the player shoot their target more accurately. When ammo becomes scarce and zombies swing back and forth while coming after you, having this visual assistant might seem small, but it goes a long way in training the player to shoot better. If you can't take down the zombie, it'll tackle Leon and gnaw at his neck. These zombie animations are something you'll need to get familiar with so you can learn how to counter or evade. After shooting the zombie in the head a couple times, it fell to the floor. I figured that it wasn't dead because there was no puddle of blood surrounding the corpse, a mechanic I became accustomed to from the last game. So I quickly scavenged the room and found a key to escape. The zombie I shot got back up, but it didn't matter because I was already trying to leave the station. But somehow, other zombies that weren't there before are inside the station. And since you're given limited ammo, the only option here is to run. This is when you run into Claire, with a pretty cute callback to the original game.
Don't shoot!
Get down!
I don't know how my Leon was able to shoot that zombie when I had already used up all my bullets when playing, but whatever. The both of them luck out by getting inside the car of the policeman that died in the back. For some reason, that police officer left the keys in the ignition as well as leaving the car doors open, so yeah. Way to luck out, Leon and Claire. I know this is something most people aren't even going to notice, but I would have found it more believable if Leon had, say, picked up the keys from the police officer's corpse, or if they took Leon's Jeep. Which, by the way, you never see that Jeep again, so I guess he just, doesn't have that car anymore. Leon and Claire drive into Raccoon City. Claire is trying to find her brother, Chris Redfield. This is a pretty cool reveal since Chris Redfield was the other playable character in the last game. While driving through the city, an intercom system says to go to the Raccoon City police station. But then Leon and Claire find themselves stuck at a blockade. Zombies start swarming the car, but then the truck driver from the beginning, who has clearly been bitten by a zombie, is now driving right at Leon and Claire. The truck driver swerves out and slams the police car out of the swarm of zombies, while somehow not killing them both. Both are separated by the accident. Leon and Claire both promise each other to meet up at the police station, and this is where the game truly begins. Surrounded by zombies with limited ammo, you're encouraged again to evade and run. Throwing all these zombies at the player was deliberately done so the player can become more familiar with the spacing required to not get attacked. These fuckers can close the gap real quick. Once you arrive at the station, you'll notice how ridiculously massive it is. There's an in-game explanation for this, as later you'll find a tourist pamphlet that explains that the police station was once an art museum. It's a stretch, but it's as good an excuse as we're going to get for why there's all these bizarre puzzles throughout the place. The first thing you'll notice when entering the station is the front desk. Here you're introduced to a few key mechanics you'll be using throughout the game. As I've already mentioned before, if you pick hardcore, you'll have to collect ink ribbons to be able to save your progress at typewriters. Make sure to save sparingly because if you don't have an ink ribbon, oof, you won't be able to save. Picking up ammo for the first time, I instinctively went into my menu to combine the ammo with my handgun. This is how you reloaded in the first game, and I kept trying to reload, but it just wouldn't let me. I did this for a few minutes, and I honestly thought maybe I had the wrong ammo, but no, if you want to reload your weapons, you just have to be carrying the ammo for it, then you just hit the reload button, just like in any other shooter. With this being a modern remake, I know that, makes sense, though I don't see why the game can't just bring you out of the inventory menu after combining to just reload it itself. Maybe the developers wanted to discourage you from doing so. It's just something you'll have to get used to if you're familiar with the last game. Next, the inventory bin, that can trigger anyone's OCD. Throughout the game, you'll collect a variety of items that can be used or combined with one another. But since Leon and Claire only have a limited number of carrying slots, you'll be item managing between your inventories. For any new players, I know item management might sound like a total chore, but trust me, there's nothing more satisfying than having the exact right items at the exact right time. If you play on normal or assist, you're given a few extra handguns from the bin. On normal, you'll just get Wesker's handgun, but on assist, you'll get Wesker's, Jill's, and Chris's handgun as well. I heard that they all have their own benefits, but hardcore doesn't give you any of these, so I never got to tinker with them that much. Messing with the computer by the bin shows you a police officer telling you to come get a journal that has the way out of the police station. Once you find the officer, he dies. Yummy. The journal tells you to collect 3 medallions. A zombie bursts through the door in the room you're in to attack you, and this is when I realize, oh, zombies aren't chained to the location that they're at. They can go through doors and get you in the room you're in. That's scary and fantastic. This is something that the player will need to keep in mind. Zombies start coming out of the woodwork to get you. Escaping unscathed is no easy feat. This is when you're introduced to Marvin, who pulls you up with his disgusting bloody hand. Marvin is clearly injured and is going to become a zombie, but until then he gives you some words of advice.
And don't make my mistake.
if you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate.
Leon then gets to change into his officer uniform, and is handed a combat knife. Looking good, dude. From this point, it's left to the player to explore the station to uncover its secrets. Let's talk about weapons. The combat knife that Marvin gives to you can be used as a melee weapon against zombies. I've already gone over this in my last critique, but the combat knife is the most dangerous weapon to use since it requires you to get up and close and personal with your target. In that sense, you're better off using your guns. However, a new mechanic has been incorporated into the combat knife from the first remake. In the first remake, you could pick up these daggers that could be used as a last stand against zombies. If a zombie got a hold of you, your character would pull out a dagger and lunge it into their head, letting you escape. In Resident Evil 2, that same mechanic is now incorporated to the combat knife. Now if a zombie gets a hold of you, you just have to hit the button prompt to lunge the knife into their chest. Doing this will of course leave you without the knife, so if you want the knife back, you'll have to finish off the zombie to take it. The combat knife isn't indestructible, however. It has a limited amount of times you can use it. This is why there's so few of them throughout the game. Flash grenades and regular grenades serve the same purpose, but they do also have other benefits. Flash grenades will of course stun zombies, while grenades can help take out a crowd. Throughout Leon's run, you'll be using 4 primary weapons: the Matilda handgun, the W870 shotgun, the Lightning Hawk, and the flamethrower. Each of them, even the Matilda, never becomes useless, especially since you can find 1 or more attachments for each weapon. These attachments can extend ammo capacity, stabilize accuracy, or just make the gun more powerful. Claire, on the other hand, has 6 primary weapons: the SLS-60 handgun, the Quick Draw Army handgun, the JMB HP-3 handgun, the MQ-11 submachine gun, the Spark Shot, and my favorite weapon in the entire game, the grenade launcher.
Oh no.
And just like in the first game, it has different types of ammunition: acid rounds and incinerator rounds. The variety of weapons Claire has is the reason her gameplay is more interesting. 3 different handguns that all have their cons and pros. Like the Quick Draw, which can shoot fast but takes a while to reload. The Spark Shot has this interesting mechanic where you have to shoot an enemy then keep holding on the aim button while looking at them to give them a shock. I've already gone over the zombies, but let's talk about the other enemies you'll be fighting in this game. Cerberuses, or as I like to call them because it's easier, zombie dogs make a return from the first game, and they work the same as well. You'll usually encounter zombie dogs in a horde, and once a zombie dog is aware of your presence, you'll need to take them out as soon as you can, because they're pretty fast, though they're not that hard to dodge. But they're probably not as fast as a licker. Lickers are debatedly the scariest looking enemies in this game, because of their skinless appearance, long tongue, and a head that is mostly their brain. They can crawl on walls, and as soon as they notice you, can wipe you out real quick. They're also tough to kill, but there is a way to avoid them. Simply walk past them, and they won't notice you. Yeah, apparently that exposed brain head of theirs covers up most of their senses, so if you can just not run past them, you're in the clear. I really love the idea of making the player get up close and personal with the licker, just so that you can avoid them. Of course, this strategy isn't always going to work. If there are other enemies in the same proximity of the licker, well, then those other enemies will probably still try to get you. So, you're going to have to pick and choose how you're going to approach a situation. Should you kill the licker, kill the other enemies, or just run and try to escape? G-type adult or lesser G is an enemy type you'll only encounter in the sewers, and they're definitely the most annoying. Given the sewers location, these guys can hide under the water and jump out at you to attack. If you ask me, it's a cheap trick. These guys are pretty big, so they tower over you. If you don't want to engage and fight them, you gotta hope that they give you enough space to squeeze by. If you try attacking at a distance, they'll spawn these disgusting little creatures to gnaw away at your health. Strangely enough, G-type adult is the only enemy in the game that poisons you. But even on hardcore, the game gives you plenty of blue herbs, so even if they do poison you, it's rarely a problem. Plant 43 zombies, or Ivy zombies, are the toughest common enemy once you reach Umbrella's underground facility. They're hard to beat mostly because the only weapons that seem to actually kill them are the flamethrower or the grenade launcher. Ergo, fire kills Plant. If you use anything else, they'll just keep coming back. Tyrant, or as he's more known as, Mr. X, has become this game's most memorable enemy, and that's for good reason. Mr. X isn't a thing that you can kill. In fact, he's almost indestructible. From the point that you first encounter him, you're running away from him for most of the game. He's terrifying as well. This giant monster in a black trench coat that's constantly speedwalking towards you, in my opinion, is the scariest thing in the game. The worst is when you're in a room and then the excellent sound design kicks in, where you can hear Mr. X's footsteps coming closer and closer towards you. Alright, let's get out of here. Shit. You wanna come in here, Woody? No, are you kidding me? Admittedly, he does become less scary once you realize that if he does corner you, he doesn't instantly kill you, he just punches you. I mean, it does knock off some health, but I don't know, I thought an instant death would be a lot more effective for this game. Actually, it's almost kind of comedic how he punches you. William Burkham is the main boss you fight throughout the game. He's the cause for the virus and therefore the zombie apocalypse. This is shown through the player through some tapes that you can find throughout the game. William Burkham has 5 forms. His first form is very tedious. You'll just be running in a circle in this factory location, and you'll realize, wow, this guy is a bullet sponge. His second form has you trying to knock him off a platform with a giant crate. The idea is good, but the execution of this mechanic was infuriating. It was the first time I was legitimately stuck, and it's not because I played the game on hard. The first phase of this fight has him get a couple cheap shots in from the roof of this room. There's no real way to avoid it either, you just have to run around and hope you get lucky. Then when he finally bursts into the room, you're supposed to avoid and run past him to reach this area. While trying to get to this platform, there were a few times where Burkham was able to catch up to me and slash my health, which is absolute bullshit. I'm just lucky that it only happened like 25% of the time. Once you're on this platform, you need to chip away at his health, while also avoiding his attacks so you can get the crate ready to knock him off. Timing became the bane of my existence because there is this grab move Birkin can just do that is almost completely unavoidable. If he grabs you while the crate is on its way back to try to knock him off, well, you're basically fucked. I cannot tell you how many times I fucking died because of this. Here we go. I missed? No, this is so... What? This is so fucking bad. No! Oh my god. This is still the worst part of the game. Why is this part so fucking bad? How did this get past testing where they were like, yeah, the mechanic were like, oh yeah, he'll like grab you and then like you literally have to start over? Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, keep that in. My first encounter with this boss was especially difficult because I didn't have much health and ammo to use in the first place. So with everything that happens up to that point, when I saw the crane finally knock him off, I was relieved. Then I realized I had to do it again. I'm not kidding when I say this. I thought I might have to actually restart the entire game because I didn't see it possible for me to get past this boss with the limited items I had. This boss was so infuriating and poorly executed that it's the reason I have to take off a whole point for this game. If this boss was better designed, I'd probably give Resident Evil 2 like a 9 or maybe 9.5 out of 10. But with the way it is with this infuriating boss, I'd knock it down like to an 8 to an 8.5. Birkin's third form is actually kind of good, for the most part. This is a boss where you actually don't have to worry that much about ammo and health, because the game graciously gives you some in the arena. The fourth form is pretty cool. The arena that you fight him in has a giant train cart in the middle that you're supposed to circle around while chipping away at his health. Unfortunately, he's a bullet sponge here as well, but you do get a minigun, and that kind of makes up for it. Shooting Birkin's fourth form is like popping a bunch of pimples. I know that sounds gross, but it's like weirdly satisfying. I also love how animalistic this fourth form is. The fifth and final form is less of a boss fight and more of a last hurrah at the end of the game. The tight corridors of this train cart is cool, and the way this form of Birkin morphs and disintegrates the cart is visually stellar. This is more of a set piece than a boss, but it's definitely fantastic. Resident Evil 2's story is nothing groundbreaking, but it did introduce characters that have become iconic. Leon has a Boy Scout personality that just wants to do good. It's a charm that makes him a likable protagonist, even if his lines are sometimes...
Hope I don't have to write a report on this.
Ada Wong, who you meet in Leon's campaign, is a secretive woman who slowly warms up to Leon the more she's with him. It was cool to see Ada, who was referenced in the first game, become an actual character here. And she's even playable. I'd also like to take this moment to objectify Ada because she's probably the hottest fucking character I've seen in a video game. I don't know what Ada was doing before the outbreak, but you do get to play as her halfway through Leon's campaign, and for some reason she's wearing this very tight dress. It's not practical, but just like with Jill Valentine, if Ada does go down, she'll look good while doing it. Last thing about Ada, but it kind of involves a spoiler, so if you don't want to be spoiled, skip to this point in 3, 2, 1. There's actually a decent twist at the end of the game where it's revealed that Ada is not an FBI agent tasked with taking down Umbrella, but is actually a mercenary that just wants to sell the G-Virus. I probably wouldn't say that any of the characters in Resident Evil are complex, but Ada probably has the most depth. Hell, she even kissed and swooned over Leon just so that he would get the virus for her. Really gonna tug at a guy's heartstring like that? During that twist reveal, the Umbrella facility that you're in is crumbling, and this is also where Ada, quote-unquote, falls to her death. I don't know how she survived that fall, but she does later give Leon a rocket launcher to finish off his final fight with Mr. X. You know, I gotta say, I think Ada's probably my favorite character. Credit to Joan Lee Anderson, who did a wonderful job as her. Claire is cool for the most part. She fills the role of action heroine fine enough, but her motivation to find her brother obviously wasn't going to last the entire game. So instead, the story has it where Claire finds a girl named Cherry who's trying to find her mom, and basically from that point forward, Claire takes on a parental role. She's a babysitter. God, I really just don't like Cherry. My disdain for her might actually have to do less with her character, a little bit that there is, and more to do with just how she becomes Claire's motivation to just keep going through the game. Cherry gets kidnapped? Well, time to go save her. Cherry starts getting infected with the G-Virus? Well, time to try and find a cure. I am not a fan of the helpless child archetype in video games. But Zap, you might be saying, she does actually help unlock a couple doors in the game. Oh, cool, she unlocked a door, great. I mean, it was already unlocked when I played as Leon. For some reason it got locked as Claire. I'd still hate her. To sum it up, Cherry was a nuisance, and her little run and hide segment was the second worst part of the game. I understand from a developer standpoint that you gotta like mix up gameplay to keep it interesting, but this was just really lame, and it just reminded me of those Mary Jane segments from Spider-Man PS4. Speaking of, let's talk about this guy, Chief Irons. He's a cartoon villain. This guy just like shows up randomly to kidnap Cherry. I can't for the life of me remember why he does that. Every time he was on screen, I couldn't help but comically laugh at how cartoonish he was. It also doesn't help that his voice is not intimidating in the slightest.
On the ground, hands behind your head.
You know who's also cartoony? Or at least she is in Claire's playthrough? Annette Birkin, who is the mother of Cherry and husband to William Birkin. Annette was part of the team that developed the G-Virus at Umbrella. She's the total cliche of being too focused on her work to notice her child, even when she's like in total need of her right in front of her. I like Annette way better in Leon's playthrough because there she's just someone who just doesn't want to give the G-Virus to anyone. When playing as Claire, her character basically does a 180 by the time she's dying, and I'm sorry, but this scene is just hilarious. Unfortunately, by the end of Claire's playthrough, Cherry lives. But everything comes full circle as whoever you play as meets with the other and walks off to the sunset. I mean, this is daytime, but yeah, I mean, that's the end of the game. Resident Evil 2's story might be unremarkable, but the gameplay, graphics, excellent sound design, decent soundtrack, and the 3 cool characters that you enjoy following make this an incredible game. You don't even have to have played the first game. This is a great starting point for anyone who's interested in this franchise. That's Resident Evil 2, 2019. A classic zombie game excellently remade for this generation. Besides maybe Sekiro, this was my favorite game from 2019. I guess now I just have to wait for the remake of Resident Evil 3 so I can continue this franchise critique. If you have any interest, I have a gaming channel named Zap Plays where you can see me play through the Resident Evil franchise for the first time, as well as playing other popular titles such as Sekiro or Catherine. If you like this critique and want to see the next one a week in advance, then consider donating to my Patreon for $2 a month. Or if you just want to show your support, like these fine people, then you can just donate for $1. Or liking and subscribing also works too. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.